Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I was in my late 20s, fresh out of grad school, and ready to start my teaching career in 2021. I landed a job at a Title I elementary school near my home, teaching music. I was thrilled that I could walk to work. However, I was so caught up in my excitement that I missed some glaring red flags. Red flag number 1. It was a week before school started, and I had called and emailed the school office staff and my principal, Miss Harper, to ask about getting my keys and badge so I could start preparing for the school year. No response from either. So I called the district office and asked when and where I could pick up my keys and badge. 2 days before school started, I finally got an email from Miss Harper. "Mr. Thompson, you should have been more patient and not contacted the main office about your keys and badge," she wrote. I finally got everything and was able to get into my room. I was horrified by how much work I had to do. Apparently, they had used my room as storage, so it was loaded with tables and desks stacked on top of each other, 10 filing cabinets, and well over 100 chairs stacked all around the room. I managed to clean out the space with help from my awesome custodian, Mr. Rodriguez. Shout out to all custodians who are the secret backbones in helping teachers get ready for the school year. Hurdle number 1 finished. Red flag number 2. It's now the first day of classes, and I haven't been informed of the schedules. I email Miss Harper again, asking what the schedule looks like and if there's a digital document I can print out. I get an email back a few minutes later. "Stop pressuring and bullying me, Mr. Thompson." I was taken aback. I replied, "I'm sorry if I made you feel that way, Miss Harper. I just need to know what classes I have and when." This leads to red flag number 3. It's 8:10 a.m., not 10 minutes after school started, and I finally get my schedule. Only to find out that I have 2 classes at the same time. Our school isn't huge, but we still have 14 classes serving K-6th grades, so I was having at least 46 kids in one classroom by myself. Moreover, I had 7 45-minute periods a day and saw every class every day of the week with only a 30-minute lunch, which was when I was on lunch duty. I approached Miss Harper in the hallway. "Excuse me, Miss Harper, is there any way we could adjust the schedule? I need time to plan and get the classroom ready between classes." She turned to me, her face red with anger. "Mr. Thompson, it's your first year teaching. You don't know what you need. Just deal with it." She stormed off, leaving me stunned in the hallway. Well, I decided not to just deal with it. I read the teacher's contract for the district. Come to find out, we had a section about classroom size. It stipulated that if you had a class over 30 students, you get to have an educational assistant to help you with the class. I brought this up with Miss Harper after a month and a half of struggling. "There's no money in the budget," she snapped. "You'll have to make do without it or quit." I'm stubborn and determined to make things work with what little I have. But things were rough. To prep and plan everything for the next day, make meaningful grades, keep up with referrals, and keep in contact with families, I was at the school from 6 a.m. when the morning custodian arrived, until 9 p.m. when the night janitor was leaving, on weekdays, and then also using my weekend time to continue to plan and grade. When it came time for my first teacher evaluation, I was dreading it. However, I got all satisfactory marks from Miss Harper. I was shocked. Little did I know this was part of her plan all along. A few more weeks passed, and I'd had it. I talked with our union about the double classes and said it wasn't sustainable, and a classroom my size couldn't safely fit more than 30 students, let alone 46. They said they would handle it. And a few more weeks went by with nothing changing. It's now the week of Thanksgiving 2021, and conferences are over. I get to not worry about anything for 2 days. So I decided to go to a potluck dinner with some old friends of mine. Here's the best part, and maybe the part that saved my career and even my sanity. I was talking with an old acquaintance, Jake, and his new husband about my teaching job and how the school year was going. Even though my students are amazing and have such creative minds, I said, it's frustrating that I don't have the time to give them what they deserve. With 2 classes at once, it's hard to get around to everyone in just 45 minutes. I noticed Jake's husband raise his eyebrow. "What school did you say you worked at?" he asked, so I told him. What harm could it do? Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, little did I know I was talking with Miss Harper's supervisor, Mr. Daniels. I found out the next Monday when Miss Harper stormed into my room at 8:05 a.m. to scream and yell at me. "How dare you go behind my back?" she shouted. "I'll fire you and make sure you never work in education again." I was shocked and confused at the time. However, later that week at our staff meeting, we talked about a change in the schedule. Now only 1 class would be in my room at a time for an hour, and I would only see them twice a week instead of all 5 days. It was magical. The kids were happier, I was calmer, was able to help each individual student if they needed it, and was able to plan enough throughout the day so I could leave at 4 p.m. Sad to say, my happiness didn't last forever. I noticed Miss Harper stalking my room and coming in nonstop to observe me. It was awkward. I also had a few of my very extroverted students come in quiet and unable to focus on work. When I asked them if everything was okay, they would burst into tears and say, "I don't want you to go." Being confused, my response was always, "Oh, Lily, I have absolutely no intentions of going anywhere. You are all the best students a teacher could ever ask for." This would cheer them up for a while, but then they would come in next week upset again. It all clicked when the day before we left for Christmas break, Miss Harper came into my room with one of her minions, who was our building union representative, to tell me I was being put on a teacher support plan. This plan was to evaluate whether or not my contract with the district would be up for renewal at the end of the school year. I was shocked, and our union rep just snickered and walked away giggling with Miss Harper. I felt sick and abused, unable to feel any emotion. It wasn't until I got home and read what this plan detailed that I saw red. I had hit my breaking point. This is when I started to formulate a plan of revenge. Some things to note. Miss Harper liked to come into school whenever she felt like it. She would be there anywhere from 7:45 a.m., our actual contract hours, to as late as 9:30 a.m. She once showed up at noon without telling anyone. I also knew that she had kept renewing a certain after-school care contractor that wasn't free to families, but they got money from the district to offer it for free. I also knew that the person running the after-school care was dating and living with Miss Harper. So during winter break, Jake and Mr. Daniels called and asked if I was free to get drinks over the holidays. I love a good cocktail, and I needed some hard liquor. When we met up, I wanted to talk about anything other than school stuff. I just wanted to keep my mind off of school drama. But Mr. Daniels brought up if things were better after he had talked about the double classes. That was when I found out that he was her boss. "What do you mean you talked to Miss Harper? How do you know her?" I asked, surprised. Mr. Daniels replied, "Oh, you didn't know. I'm the supervising administrator for that cohort of schools." My jaw dropped, and I started to hyperventilate. Mr. Daniels was startled and asked what was wrong. So I told him everything. How she yelled and threatened to get me fired, how she put me on this support plan, and how she just kept observing my class without notifying me. His face went from a concerned look to surprised to red with anger. He told me, "I really always had a bad vibe from her and always wondered why there were so many new teachers at that school every year. What else can you tell me about what's going on?" I hesitated to tell him everything, but Jake told me not to worry. He had seen this look before, and that they were on my side. So I told them everything I knew. They both just sat there awestruck, unable to speak about what they were hearing. After break was over, I was dreading coming back to my class, but I didn't want to miss seeing my students. So I pushed on. I was walking in the hall to my mailbox when I saw a few of my students who had cried and told me they didn't want me to leave. They ran up and gave me the biggest, longest hug ever, saying, "You're here! You're here!" "Of course I'm here," I replied. "I wouldn't leave the best students ever. Now would I?" "But Miss Harper said you were going to leave us because you didn't want to be here, and we should give you trouble before you left," one of them, Max, said. Trying to hold my rage, I responded, "Oh, maybe she was talking about how I was leaving to visit family over the break. No need to worry, I'm still here." Yes, this wretched woman tried to purposely make kids misbehave in my class to write me up for not having a good rapport with my students. I was beyond livid. So the next time I had class with Max, I asked him if he could make a comic book of the conversation he had with Miss Harper when she told them I was leaving, and make an ending he wanted. Phase 1 started. Phase 2. I contacted Mr. Daniels and told him that per my contract, I wanted another admin to accompany Miss Harper's teacher support observations, and I wanted it to be him. He said absolutely, but not to tell Miss Harper just yet. The first day of my observation came, and Miss Harper walked in without a notebook or anything to take notes, looking proud of herself like she was about to get away with firing me. She was shocked and confused when Mr. Daniels walked in with a laptop and sat next to her, starting to type notes about how I was doing. She stumbled around and came to ask me for a notepad to take notes. I told her, "I don't have an extra notepad, but I do have some poster paper." We were making movie posters of a movie we would star in to go with our comic books. "I hope you can be better prepared for the next observation so as not to disrupt my class and take time away from their instructional time." Mr. Daniels just smirked. Phase 3. I was now calling Mr. Daniels whenever Miss Harper was late getting to school, and he would do a random stop-by if he was close. So he was able to document that she was not showing up to work on time and not submitting the paperwork to have it be taken out of her leave minutes. Overall, we got her at least 2 times a week for a solid month. I think he even asked someone from HR to come to our school to see for herself at 9 a.m., and Miss Harper still wasn't even there. Now time for Phase 4, which was my favorite one. Getting the parents on board. I first started talking to parents who seemed to always be late picking up their students. I would chat about it, and they said it was hard to get there on time, and they often had to leave early. When I told them about our after-school care, they would tell me that it cost too much for them. However, I would inform them that since we are a Title I school, after-school care was supposed to be free and paid for by the district. I gave them a nifty flyer I made up with the website to fill out the forms and which ones to fill out. This made word spread around to parents paying the contractors directly that it was supposed to be free, and boy, was that a fun PTA meeting to go to. I also made sure Miss Harper knew it was me who informed the parents about that free after-school care program. After this, there were countless investigations at our school. Head administrators from the central office were stopping by our school, auditors came in, and our union finally got involved and tried to play the heroes victims of this incident. The outcome. The second half of the year was very chill. Mr. Daniels made sure that my teacher support plan was taken off my teaching record, and Miss Harper was not allowed to do my second term evaluations, nor was she allowed to do any informal observations. The after-school care contractor was fired and taken over by one recommended by the district, and my students were making amazing strides in their posters and comics. At the end of the year, when we were getting our assignments, jobs for the next year, Miss Harper made one last attempt to get me to leave. Mr. Thompson, our budget doesn't have the funds for a music teacher next year. You might want to seek employment elsewhere, she said with a smirk. I laughed in her face and said, "Nice try, Miss Harper. My position is paid for by a state bond and isn't affected by your budget from the district. If there isn't anything else, I'll be leaving now." I walked out and I could hear her slam her desk and swear up a storm as I closed the door. At the end of the year, I had Max share his comic book about how Miss Harper told him to give me trouble in class at our school's talent show, leaving the already pissed-off parents more pissed that an adult would tell a child to act in such a way. I even think she had a shoe thrown at her when she ran on stage to stop him from finishing his comic. To the surprise of no one, on the last day of school, she announced on the intercoms after students had left that she would be resigning from our school to move to a different position where she was needed and that she would miss almost all of us. I came to find out after stalking her on LinkedIn 2 years later that she had to get a job out of the district an hour's drive away to get another admin job, but only stayed for a year. Then she had to step down to teaching English at a different school in another district the next year. And for those of you wondering how Max's comic book ended, the music hero rallied the students against the angry principal to make her see the errors of her ways, but the angry principal could not become happy, so she left, and the power of happiness filled the school once again, Finn. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd end up in court over a car, but here I am. It all started when my Uncle Pete passed away last year. We were pretty close, and he left me his prized possession, a beautifully restored 1967 Ford Mustang. Uncle Pete had spent years working on that car, pouring his heart and soul into every detail. It was his baby, and I was honored he wanted me to have it. The trouble began about a month after the funeral. I was in my driveway, washing the Mustang and getting ready to take it for a spin, when my neighbor Karen stomped over. "That's a nice car," she said, eyeing it like a vulture. "Pete sure did a great job restoring it." "Thanks," I replied. "Yeah, he put a lot of work into it over the years." Karen nodded, then dropped a bomb on me. "You know, Pete promised me I could have that car when he was done with it. I'm here to collect." I nearly dropped the sponge I was holding. "Excuse me? Uncle Pete left the car to me in his will. It's mine now." Karen's face twisted into an ugly scowl. "Well, he told me I could have it years ago. He probably just forgot to change his will. You need to hand over those keys right now." I stood my ground. "I'm sorry, but that's not happening. The car is legally mine now. Pete never mentioned anything to me about promising it to you." "This isn't over," Karen snarled as she stormed off. I shook my head, figuring she was just being dramatic. Boy, was I wrong. A week later, I got served with court papers. Karen was actually suing me for ownership of the Mustang. Her claim was that Pete had verbally promised her the car years ago, and that this verbal contract superseded the will. I was floored. Who does something like this? I contacted a lawyer friend of mine, explained the situation, and asked for advice. He agreed to represent me pro bono, saying Karen's case had no legal merit. Still, we had to go through the motions of fighting it in court. The next few months were a nightmare of legal back and forth. Karen hired some sleazy ambulance chaser of a lawyer who threw every ridiculous argument at the wall to see what would stick. They claimed Pete had dementia when he wrote his will. He didn't. They said I had manipulated him into leaving me the car. I hadn't. They even tried arguing that since Karen had helped Pete wash the car a few times, she had sweat equity in it. It was insane. Meanwhile, Karen launched a smear campaign against me in the neighborhood. She told anyone who would listen that I was a thief who had stolen her car. Some neighbors even started giving me the cold shoulder. It was infuriating to be painted as the bad guy when I had done nothing wrong. Finally, our court date arrived. I was a nervous wreck as we entered the courtroom. My lawyer assured me we had a rock-solid case, but after months of Karen's antics, I was prepared for anything. The judge listened patiently as Karen's lawyer presented their flimsy case. He showed a few photos of Karen posing next to the Mustang at neighborhood cookouts, as if that proved anything. He called character witnesses who testified that Pete had mentioned someday giving Karen the car. But it was all hearsay and circumstantial evidence. When it was our turn, my lawyer calmly and methodically dismantled their arguments. He presented Pete's notarized will, which clearly left the car to me. He called the lawyer who had prepared the will, who testified that Pete had been of sound mind. He even had an audio recording of Pete talking about leaving me the Mustang, taken just weeks before he passed. The nail in the coffin came when my lawyer called Pete's best friend as a witness. He testified that Pete had specifically told him he would never leave the car to Karen because she had pestered him about it constantly and he found it disrespectful. I could see Karen's face getting redder and redder as our case unfolded. By the time closing arguments were done, she looked ready to explode. The judge didn't even leave to deliberate. He immediately ruled in my favor, saying there was zero evidence to support Karen's claim of a verbal contract. He criticized her lawyer for bringing such a frivolous case to court and even ordered Karen to pay my legal fees. As we left the courtroom, Karen tried to confront me one last time. "This isn't fair. That car should be mine." I'd had enough of her nonsense. "Karen, the car was never yours. Uncle Pete left it to me because he wanted me to have it. Your sense of entitlement doesn't trump his final wishes. Now leave me alone or I'll get a restraining order." She stomped off in a huff, hopefully for the last time. I breathed a huge sigh of relief, knowing the ordeal was finally over. When I got home, I took the Mustang out for a long drive to clear my head. As I cruised down the highway, I couldn't help but smile thinking about Uncle Pete. I knew he'd be proud that I fought to keep his beloved car in the family. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for myself and not letting bullies push me around. It also showed me the importance of having a clear, legally binding will. I made an appointment with my lawyer the very next day to get my own affairs in order, just in case. These days, I enjoy taking the Mustang out on weekends, feeling connected to Uncle Pete's memory with every mile. Karen still glares at me whenever I drive by, but I just wave and keep on cruising. Life's too short to let petty, greedy people bring you down. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even if it means going to court. In the end, justice prevailed, and that's all that matters. The next one is a petty revenge story. So this is a small but ongoing petty revenge on one of my neighbors. So this neighbor loves to work on cars and has an extensive tool collection that he is very meticulous about. I will occasionally borrow tools and always make sure they are returned pristine. Well, a while back, he accused me of losing one of his wrenches, which I absolutely did not. Maybe he let someone else borrow it and forgot. Regardless, he holds it against me and loves to nag me about it. Cue petty revenge. Now, every once in a while when I'm over at his house, I'll snatch a small tool. Maybe a 10mm socket or a 3/4 inch Allen wrench. I'll hold it hostage for a bit, then return it and snatch another small tool. But I know that the fact that it is missing will drive him up the wall. He will probably spend an hour tearing apart his garage looking for it, then lo and behold, it just happens to find its way home. I know I'll eventually get caught and we will laugh about it over some beers, but right now I'm having some petty enjoyment at his expense. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I have always hated mowing the lawn. At the same time, I don't want to be that neighbor, so I do my best to stay on top of the lawn. However, while I started out strong this summer, I had a series of medical issues that left me in a state that mowing was a bit too much than I could handle. Add in a few other excuses on the few remaining times I could mow, the lawn was making me look like I was the neighbor I didn't want to be. I decided I'd pay someone to mow for a change and then pick it back up once it was back under control. My first mistake was when the company I contacted had advertised a one-time cut, but when calling to schedule service, notified me they have a 3-cut minimum. I should have backed out then. I didn't. The first mower showed up and canceled the mowing, claiming my lawn was 100% over 23 inches and as such for excessive height, and proceeded to list that they'd charge me a 500% markup for the service. The photos taken were of the few higher points in the lawn, all my front yard, with a tape measure you couldn't read the numbers off of. I was annoyed to say the least, and I tried to originally cancel here, but hit with the whole contract bit, so I told them I'd mow it and I'd just use them to end the season and take it easy. I actually only mowed the front lawn, and even then, not the whole lawn. Miraculously, 2 weeks later, the mower that showed up did the whole lawn and somehow didn't see the backyard that I left untouched was a problem. The next mowing day came and went, and no one showed. So I reported it and canceled the mowing through the app. Despite canceling, someone showed up the following day. I'm annoyed and I want out, so I go into the app and try to cancel my service again. It looks like the service was canceled and I save screenshots. Then, today, I get a message saying my mower is on the way. Here's the thing. We have had a drought for the last month or so. It's the end of the season, and my lawn hasn't grown even a half inch in the last 2 weeks. I am beyond furious at this point. I wait until the guy shows up, I talk to him, he's a great guy. He's a contractor for this booking company, which is what I thought was the case. He tells me he gets this all the time. He lets me know he's going to send a message to the company. I felt bad his time got wasted, but there wasn't much I could do about that. An hour later, I get a message showing I'm rescheduled for tomorrow. I'm done. So I call them up, and after speaking with one agent, I get to the escalation team. He tells me my service is canceled, but I still have one mowing as per the contract. We go back and forth for a bit, and he won't budge. I ask him if he would schedule snow removal in the middle of summer, so why should I schedule mowing when it isn't needed? Nothing. Fine. Schedule me for June in 2047. June when, sir? June 4th, 2047. I'm sure I'll need my lawn mowed then. We can't schedule that far in advance. He's insistent it has to be this or next year, but I keep pushing. And I remind him that I agreed to a 3-cut minimum, and nowhere in any of the conversations did the company specific a restriction on when. So I wanted to schedule it on June 4th, 2047, and he needed to schedule it happen. One moment, sir, while I talk to support. I wait for another few minutes and then he comes back. Your service is fully canceled. No one is coming out. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.